So I wanted to talk to you today about really two things. One which is creating sprint plans and the sprint retrospective. Very important topic. I'm just going to go ahead and just give you a short demo while I talk about it, and I think you'll get the idea of what we're trying to achieve. I think we should start with a little bit of a history lesson, however. Years ago, when we built systems, the applications might have taken 6, 9, 12 months to produce. A very long time. We were taught in the early days that we should create a project plan that was extensive, that covered all aspects of the project, that would help identify what work needed to be done and who was going to do the work and what the timing was. And it was quite a large, complex process. The unfortunate thing, I think the goal was the right thing to do to try and plan ahead, but I think the problem is just the duration of the plan. We used to plan for such a long period of time. There's no way that you could predict what would be happening in 4, 5, or 6 months down the road. I think we've learned through a number of failed projects that this was not a good way to do planning. We still do planning with projects, even using Scrum. It's a great approach, but we still have to provide some planning to, again, make sure that we don't forget anything along the way, to ensure good quality, and hopefully help identify weaknesses in our process and hold people accountable for the work that they're required to do. So that's my goal here, at least in my first part of the video today, is to talk about the actual planning process. Planning, when it comes to Scrum, is limited to a single sprint. I know that, as we've discussed before, that sprints generally are 2 to 4 weeks in length. And in fact, in most projects I've worked on, they've been 2 weeks in length. So that is very standard in the industry. So when you make plans relative to your development efforts, it's really going to be 2 weeks at a time. I want to go ahead and I'm going to create a short plan here that's going to identify what to do in one single sprint. I'm using a tool that you probably have not used before, a product called ClickUp. I like it a lot. I know that you've probably used something like Trello or some other board tool, but I wanted to just show you a different product just so that you've got an opportunity to see something new that you might not have used before. A lot of the terms I'm going to use, we've already learned throughout the semester, so I know you're going to remember them, and I don't need to define them. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in. With ClickUp, if you look at the control panel I've got, if you look at the left-hand side of the screen, you're going to find that I have a product backlog out there. Remembering that a product backlog is just a list of all the requirements the user has in some type of prioritized order. The user sets the priority for these user stories. They are telling you which requirements they want to be built into the system first. So the best place to start is to look at the product backlog and see what the user wants you to do next. When I click on the product backlog, it's actually displayed in this first column, which is called the open column. And again, this, like many board tools, organizes it into a number of different columns and tasks. So this should be a very familiar interface to you guys based on certain tools that you might have used. They're all very, very similar in concept. So if you look at the left-hand side, my backlog, I've also identified that my project is going to be 3 sprints in length. So I look at the product backlog, I click on it, and the first user story is, as a business owner, I want to be able to provide payment processing to charge members a monthly fee. Now, to be honest, it really doesn't matter what application it is. I'm not going to go ahead and spend a lot of time giving you background on the application. I just want to make sure that many applications that do charge a fee for membership are going to have a very similar requirement. And I'm going to focus on that one today. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is identify that this user story is actually going to be in the first sprint. I simply want to pull it from the product backlog and put it into sprint number 1, and that'll get me started. So if I look at sprint 1 now, it's comprised of a single user story. I can add any additional ones as well, and I'm just going to grab another one, and I'm going to go and include that. So at this point, I've now got 2 user stories that I'm going to work on this week. I can add user stories, and again, I'm not worried about the interface. You can try this tool if you like, or use another tool. It doesn't really matter. What's most important to me is the actual plan itself. So what I need to do now, if you look at these columns, I've got open. So in other words, I've said that this user story, in fact, these two user stories are going to be part of this sprint. And the first thing I want to do now is plan it out in more granular detail. So I'm going to click on it. And it tells me again what the user story is. And what we want to be able to do in a sprint plan is for each user story, break each one down into a series of subtasks. What's a subtask? Well, it's an individual task. They call them atomic tasks sometimes because they can't be divided. It's a task that needs to be done to fulfill this user requirement. And it takes, in most cases, many, many tasks to complete a user story, to actually build that software. So the first thing we want to do is go ahead and identify what are the individual tasks in doing something. If you think about it, if you wanted to, I don't know, create a pool in the backyard, you can't just start pouring the old concrete and filling it up with water. You got to figure out what's the design of the pool. Lay it out on the ground. Dig up the land. Prepare the plumbing. So again, there's a series of steps that need to be done in the correct order. So that's what we're simply going to do here. Again, down the left-hand side, I've got a to-do list where it's going to allow me to create new tasks that go along with this particular user story. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a subtask that's going to, again, help me clarify what the requirements are. So many times when you're working on a project, somebody says, oh, I want to be able to charge for something, but you don't have enough requirements yet. You don't understand enough about what you're trying to do in order to, again, make a good determination of the software and what needs to be coded. So the first task is I'm going to gather additional requirements just to make sure I understand what needs to be done. So that's the first one. Now I've got the requirements. I'm going to select a product to integrate, with my application to facilitate the payments. A lot of times, again, I live in the cloud. I don't want to build all this stuff. There are so many great payment processors in the cloud. Why would I even consider trying to build something of my own? So I want to select a product. I'm going to sign up for the payment service, I guess. So that's important. Sorry about the typing. And in fact, I can go back and correct any errors that I need. So just my typing sometimes, not the best. So anyways, keep that in mind. And we want to be nice and accurate in what we do. So I'm going to sign up for the service. Now, I'm going to read the documentation. And I'm sure that you guys love that. To install the user interface kit. I'm then going to configure the product for my use. I'm then going to build into my JavaScript the code necessary to pass the payment to the cloud payment request, really, to the cloud provider. That'd be great. And then I can test using several transactions to ensure that the payment gateway works, whatever. Store the results in a local Firebase instance, and then provide a confirmation of payment to the customer And so that's at least a good list, a good start. So these are all the subtasks that are going to be part of this main task. So I've got the main task, and I want to be able to provide payment processing. I want to actually gather some information, select a partner, figure out how to use it, integrate the code, test the heck out of it, and make sure that I can then deploy into production. Now, the next thing you're going to need to do is for each one of these, I want to be able to identify who to assign this to, because you want to be able to hold people accountable. So I'm going to go ahead, and unfortunately there's just me on the project. So I'm just going to assign me to the tasks. And again, that's just the way it's going to be unless I want to add more members. You're going to find that a lot of these systems, in addition to being able to set up the subtasks, you're going to be able to provide additional information as well. You can include attachments. You can put in some documents in there for it. You can put in all kinds of information that will help you, again, create a good plan. And the nice thing about this, once I've gone ahead and I've assigned all these tasks to individuals, then at the end of the day, I'm going to have a fairly comprehensive plan of what needs to be done and in what sequence. And you can reorder these as needed. If you find that they're out of sequence, you can do that. And again, it's just a really good way to keep a list of what needs to be done. Each of these tools will allow you to look at not only the task at hand, but again, all of these subtasks, and you can actually you can actually monitor the status. Once I've planned it out, I'm actually going to move this into the planned column of my application. And again, it shows that for this user story, there are 9 subtasks, of which 4 are already assigned to individuals. Many are still yet to be assigned. So that's what this is for, is that you can actually keep track of it. And as the progress of the project goes through, I can then move this task from one status column to another. And in fact, again, there's again, it's just a really good way to monitor things. Most of these tools do keep a complete history, if you look at the right, of when things got changed and where. And in fact, you can still override some of the basic column information. So right now, if I've gathered the information, I can say that this one's actually closed. It'll mark it off my list, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. This particular one is in the this is in the closed state as well. I'm going to close that out. Sign up for the service. Again, I can sign up for the service. I can say that that's actually in testing right now. So a lot of good information that can be gathered, and again, you can use this tool to keep track of it very, very quickly. And so as we continue to keep moving this through the process, through to testing, and eventually through to closed, we can then consider it done at the end of the day. So very easy tool to use. Again, it's not going to let me close it out until I try and deal with some of these other tasks that are incomplete yet. But that's all we're trying to do, is just identify what are the user stories within the sprint. All user stories in a sprint should be planned. Make sure there's a user assigned to each user story in the sprint. Track it as it moves through the stages from planned to development, development to testing, and testing ultimately to closure. So that's pretty much it. And the goal every time is to create a sprint plan that you can complete. The task should be completed in the sprint itself. You shouldn't have a situation, if you've done proper planning, where a user story will span more than one sprint. If it does, you need to break it down. So the goal at the end of every sprint is to have all the user stories and all the tasks completed. And that should be your goal as well. It sounds easy for some. I find it difficult at times, particularly for those that are new to this process. But we only want to plan out one sprint at a time, and again, hold people accountable ultimately. So that's generally the gist in terms of sprint planning. The other thing you need to look at is a sprint retrospective, because it kind of goes hand in glove with the sprint plan. The sprint retrospective, I actually have a separate video for, but I'm going to at least introduce the concept during this video. So what you want to be able to do with a sprint retrospective is two things. You want to be able to capture the time that you've spent working on a project, for example, the tasks or the subtasks within a sprint. You want to capture that information, but you also want to be able to identify any issues that are impeding your progress of moving the project forward on a real-time basis. So in essence, a sprint retrospective, I kind of think of it as a fancy timesheet. So what you're going to do with a sprint retrospective is once you've got a plan produced and you've got everybody assigned, each individual on the team will go ahead and create a sprint retrospective. So in other words, a timesheet outlining all of their subtasks. And as they work through a project, they record information against it that then compares back to the original plan. And that's what we want to be able to see. The plan, it's a plan, it's a budget, it's an estimate, it's an educated guess. The retrospective tells you how the plan actually, how close it was, how well you executed on the plan, and ultimately how successful your plan was. By using sprint plans in conjunction with the sprint retrospective, I think we get a lot better at estimating projects, identifying work that needs to be done, and ultimately just being a better IT professional. So I'm going to stop the video here in terms of sprint planning. You can always ask the professor for a lot more detailed information, and I'm sure they'd be happy to, again, create a sprint plan with you, demo the tool for you, and anything you might need. So I'm going to leave it here for this video, and please watch the next video where we're actually going to use Excel to capture actual and estimate information for a sprint retrospective. Thanks for listening today. Bye.